Welcome to our brand new series where we demystify the world of startups. If you are anybody in the startup ecosystem, be it a founder, an operator, or an investor, or if you are exploring the startup ecosystem, this series is for you. My name is Aviral Bhatnagar, and in today's episode, we will deep dive into VC as a career option. The idea here is you get a sneak peek into a day in the life of a VC and help you answer if VC is for you, and if yes, what will it take to become a VC. I think what we can start with first is whether you need a pedigree or a degree in a B school to join a VC firm. I think if you look at most Indian VCs, it seems like there is a pattern where you have to have gone to a good college, either in India or abroad, to get into a venture firm. Additionally, there is this topic of whether you need to go to a business school to actually progress. I think if you look at the Indian ecosystem and compare it to the US, the US is far more vibrant and diverse in terms of backgrounds. For example, if you look at Mike Moritz, who was one of the senior partners at Sequoia, he actually had a journalism degree. You don't really find too many people with that kind of background in India yet. But the beauty of venture is that you can get a variety of people who are from many different backgrounds and join VC firms. The reason is that venture actually is not a finance job but a people's business, and people who understand people can come from anywhere. That said, in India, because we have a history of PE firms that have actually started to do venture investing, the classical VC is more like a PE person who has gone to a top tier school, has pedigree, has obviously an MBA, but that is fast changing. I expect it to get even more diverse over the next 10 years. We are already starting to see it with the new funds that are starting. If you are trying to get into VC, at least for me, the most important thing is, do you have a network and are you able to demonstrate access to startups? I would say that's most important beyond your background. If you can demonstrate that kind of value, I think it really doesn't matter what your background is, but getting the ability to demonstrate that kind of value is hard. So I think that's really the most important question or the elephant in the room. Now, when we look at the operating environment and how a VC firm actually works, we need to understand the business of VC. So I'll not make it very complicated, but there are three major parties in this ecosystem. There are the LPs, who are basically our investors. There are VCs, which is me and us, and there are founders, who are teams that we fund. LPs give us money to manage, so we are not very different from any sort of investment manager, mutual fund manager, PE manager, hedge fund manager. We are of the same breed. We manage their money by investing it in startups which they don't either have access to, or the ability to, or the bandwidth to invest in, which is why they hire us for management of their money. There are multiple LPs that every VC fund has. The larger the fund, the more the LPs, and the larger their size. Our North Star, at least as an industry, is multiple and IRR. Both are actually quite related to each other. Sometimes you can have a large multiple, but if it is for many years, your IRRs reduce. But in general, I think these are the two things that matter for a VC firm. From a math standpoint, IRR and multiple is what matters for us and LPs. I think from a founder standpoint, they're a bit soft in terms of what actually matters. You could say NPS matters, or referrals that founders make to you matters. This is actually like the flywheel on the other side, with the LP and VC flywheel on one side. I think it's very hard to measure the second part, but it shows in returns and IRRs. So eventually, I think everything boils down to those two. But firms, because it takes so much time for multiples and IRRs to work out, because VC is a long game, you sometimes take almost 7 to 8 years to actually see a success. The founder NPS, referrals, and others are good metrics to know whether or not people are referring you to other founders. I think in the interim, till you don't have IRRs and multiples, portfolio markups, etc., those things are there. If anyone's invested in any sort of asset class, they'll know what that means. But this is really it. So, in summary, the IRR and multiples is really a VC fund's North Star. Coming into what a typical workday of a VC looks like, I would say there are three major things that a venture investor does. And the interesting thing about this is, regardless of how old you are or how senior you are, everyone does this, right? So there's meeting new companies, which is called sourcing, diligence, which is evaluating these investments, and portfolio management, which is once you have invested, how do you help them get to the next level? Everyone at every firm does all these three things if they are an investor. The more junior you are, more likely you are to be doing sourcing, but it's not like if you're senior in a firm, you will not be doing sourcing. I think sourcing is critical. It's probably the most important thing, especially if you're a earlier stage VC. The access you have and the founders you can invest in eventually becomes your competitive advantage. At some point, being able to pick the right founders starts to kick in once you have got this flywheel. If you don't have access, you really can't do much. But getting sourcing right is extremely important, and creating deal flow is extremely important. How can you source? I think it's a topic for another video. But at a high level, there are multiple ways you can have distribution online, which is LinkedIn or Twitter. You can be very well networked with founders who send you deal flow. You can go to events. You can write, not necessarily on social, but just generally. I think there are multiple ways to get deal flow. I just shared examples. Now, once you have sourced a company, you evaluate it. Now, depending on the stage of the VC firm or how small or large it is, three things matter. One is the founder, the second is the market, and the third is the product. Now, why am I saying that what matters more depends on the stage of the firm? The younger the company or the earlier the stage, for example, I invest in seed, the founder and the market are probably the most important, because there's really no product. You can't back any product or company. In many cases, we've invested in situations where the company is not even there. It's just a paper plan. So at seed, you are investing in the founder and market. As the VC firm increases in check size and goes forward in stage, the product starts to become more important. The market obviously remains, and the founding team, as a percentage it reduces, obviously they will remain important always. What we try to do is check, at least at seed, both these boxes. Is the founder or founding team edgy, special, and is the market large enough? And large enough is, can we think of a $1 billion outcome? That's how we think about it. Now again, if we go into details of how diligence is done, that's another topic and another video that we can deep dive into. But essentially, we are trying to get comfort on, is this a founding team that we can back, and is this a market that we can play in? If there's a product, of course, we look at understanding customers and whether it can be something that people want to use. Now, stage 3, which is the final part that I talked about of a typical workday. Once you have invested in a company, you are going to help them. It's a pejorative term that's used a lot, which is VCs add value. I personally think that the best way you can enable a founder is by helping them with what they need and getting out of the way, rather than trying to impose yourself or trying to run the company, which obviously is not the way any VC should operate. How you can add value the most, or how you can help the founder the most, is one, strategic thinking, being this sounding board with the founder in terms of how they are navigating the company. Hiring, it's a big gap. Founders are unable to hire in the earlier stages because they're such a small company. Nobody really knows who they are. They can lean on the brand of the venture firm to hire. Introductions to customers, which could be in your portfolio or people you know, and in general, just being like a support for the founder. I would say the best VCs are actually like coaches who stay in the background while the founders are the heroes or the players in the game. There's no one right style. I think what I've learned in venture is there is really no playbook as such. You should do what is required for you, and you should do what is working for you rather than trying to imitate others. And when we talk about the kind of model or what VC really is like, as we go ahead in this conversation, you'll realize that why is it important to have your own style and your own way of investing. An interesting conversation that has been going on now that we have covered these three things is the 70-hour work week. I'm personally a big fan of working hard and not really measuring input by the number of hours. But when I was graduating in 2014, people used to boast about working hundreds of hours, right? And I find it really interesting to see now people even find 70 hours to be a lot. Maybe we have become richer and progress more, where even 70 hours seems like a lot, because 100 hours was a norm for all of the top tier jobs that we used to get when I was graduating. And now we have so much time for leisure, so maybe we can say 70 hours. But I think venture specifically is about showing up every day. The results take so much time that you need a lot of patience. I think it is a lot like a hunting job rather than a farming job. A hunting job is where you spend a lot of your time sharpening your tools, waiting. And then when the time comes to actually execute, you have to be able to do it fast, accurately, and with a lot of depth. And that's a very different skill from operating a company. Many people might say that, VCs don't seem to be doing much. I don't think that's true. Obviously, it's not as hard as running a company, but there are a lot of dynamics at play which are very different from working in a company. And I think in venture, being present and available is the most important needle mover rather than working all the time. You have to be there at the right place at the right time. And I think that comes with just putting in the hours and doing things on a regular basis every day. Like showing up is very important. The outcomes don't really follow linearly or directly. And I think, this is a good segue into what I think about VC and my experience. From the outside, it looks like it's an amazing job and everyone should become a venture investor. But I actually don't think it's for everyone. I kind of touched upon this when I said that you need to be very patient. You need to have a very patient DNA. Sometimes for years you will not see outcomes, and then another few years, if you wait, it's suddenly spikes. That's the nature of the game. It's quite exponential. So the early part of an exponent is flat almost, and then towards the end it really picks up. People who are not the patient type, and I'm not saying that patience is necessarily good or bad, like impatience is also good. It's a very good trait to have as a founder. They may feel stifled in a venture environment. That's why it's not necessary that founders would translate into good VCs necessarily. I mean, there are many founders who have translated into good VCs, and I'm not saying that there's a norm, but a lot of people who expect input output happening very quickly, VC is not like that. So you might feel very disconnected with what's happening if you're that kind of personality, and many personalities actually realize that after they become venture investors, that this is not really my cup of tea. The other thing that's probably a drawback is it's an end career as such. I think there are really no exit options apart from being a founder. I don't think any VC will want to do anything else except being in the startup ecosystem. So you've kind of committed yourself to a career path for a long time, or forever probably, which is not necessarily true in any other career path. I personally am not a fan of the concept of an exit option as such. I think the people who are known for things in life do one thing really well for many years, even decades. So I'm not really concerned about exit options, but for a lot of people it is important. And I think finally, it's not a drawback, but just generally, VC is an apprenticeship. It is not going up the corporate ladder and doing ABC things which will result in outcomes. It's closer to being a chef than working in a factory. I think that, spectrum where you learn by watching and learn by doing. And like I said earlier, there's really no playbook. I can't tell you that, hey, do these 5 things and you'll be a good VC. I mean, I can't even write that for myself. I think the best venture investing is done when you observe and you look at others and you look at what you have done and the outcomes. I think that's how it is very different from other jobs, and that's why people say it's more of an art than a science, or it's as much of an art as a science. I personally believe the earlier you invest, the more art it becomes. It's so much art at the pre-seed or angel stage, right? So I think that's what you should look at when you're thinking of VC as a job in terms of negatives or cons. Pros, obviously, everyone obviously knows. You get to work with amazing founders. There's obviously a lot of responsibility that you are entrusted with, which is writing a check. It's not one to be taken lightly. And I think very early on in life, you can do this, which accelerates your learning. Even though I'm not very old, I have access to founders who've been there for 20, 30 years. You can learn so much from them and they'll take you seriously. I think this is a very, very big upside of being a venture investor. I also think that eventually, if you are good and you stay on for a long time, the economics follow, and the economic upside is quite high. I think there are very few professions that are there globally that I can think of which have that kind of economics. And I think finally, just to close out this part, traits and habits which will make a good fit. I think patience is very important. Discipline is very important. Like knowing where to invest and knowing not where to invest is a game of discipline and control. You need to be a very interesting mix of thoughtful and outgoing. Many times, thoughtful type is introverted and outgoing type is extroverted. So I kind of joke that you have to be like an academically focused salesperson. So you should be able to think big picture and vision while also being able to tell your story and convince founders to work with you. I think these 3 or 4 traits are super important. Like I said, showing up, extremely important. You have to be there. Don't miss that deal, because that's the upside that you could miss. And I think, if you don't have these traits or you don't find them very appealing, maybe this is not for you. But if you do, it could be a good career. And just to close out, the whole conversation, what are good books to read according to me about venture? And I think you can even touch upon the startup ecosystem to learn. I think 2 very good books that I read that were specifically on venture. One is called VC by Tom Nichols. The other is about venture, written by Sebastian Malaby, where he talks about the entire VC history, etc. I think some other books that can give you a flavor of what the venture ecosystem is like is Steve Jobs' biography. It talks about the early days of Apple. There's a book on Google which talks about Google, and they also talk about how venture has come up. I also think 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel is a very good book for startup founders, but also tells you as a venture investor what are the things that you should think about. So this is the life of a VC. A junior VC started off as life of a junior VC, so it's awesome to come full circle and talk about this. If you're not aware of a junior VC, it's the largest internet community making startups accessible to everyone. We have more than 100,000 actives on our platforms every month, and our newsletter goes to more than 60,000 readers. So if you are interested in the startup ecosystem and you're hearing about us for the first time, please subscribe and please sign up for our newsletter. Hope you had a good learning conversation, and tune in for the next episode.